Here we go. Let's do this.
We've got one life, one shot. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? Addicted to Betterment, a podcast to inspire us to keep going, to try something new, to dream, to think big, bigger, to overcome. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Hey, it's Nikki, and I'm back on Addicted to Betterment, and I haven't had a chance to be with our amazing partners, Dr. Saddoris and John Nieters, talking about health. And we've said they are the most transformative teachers that David and I have ever worked with to transform not just our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health. There's so many nuggets that we have learned from these two and their life experiences. And today, I get to dig in deep on one that, I would say most that have known me for a very long time know that I have had some repeated challenges in this area. And there's so much that I can apply into building the foundation for thriving relationships. And one of the things that I found in my pursuit of, I always want meaningful, deep relationships, but then similar patterns have crept in, whether that's in romantic scenarios or business scenarios. And I've had to learn, unless I figure out what that stuff is, it just keeps coming up. And the two of them today, Dr. Saddoris and John Nieters, they're going to help us go deep. This is probably going to be a multi-part kind of series of learning together. But today we're going to start with the inner work. And so thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Teddy and John. I'd love to start with, for those listening, they may say, well, I don't know. I don't know if I have these issues. I'm not sure. I don't know if I have something to work on. And, how do I even start to lay the foundation? How do we understand if there's some of this, that we do need to work on? What would be some of those signals? And then where do we start?
Yeah, I think it comes down to awareness. And unfortunately, I've been in that situation where, I thought I was perfectly fine and there was problems with the world, And so I had to start looking at my actions and without judgment. It's kind of like you're watching a movie and you're just observing yourself and you're seeing how the things you say and the way you say it, how it's reacting to other people or responding to them. And then they start having to analyzing, why am I responding negatively to this person? And why is it always triggering some emotional reaction in me? And so it's the answering of the why is where you start dwelling into getting into your deeper parts of your heart. Because we all live in the superficial and we always kind of think that we're right and other people are wrong, and we respond to people maybe in a way that's not constructive, and it causes conflict. And we get into I'm right, you're wrong, and you're not communicating, and it's partly because you haven't learned to communicate with yourself. And it's only when you start trying to understand, why is this hurting me? What is it in my past? Because, part of the problem that we have in order to gain wisdom is that we have to unlearn what everybody taught us, right? And in order to unlearn it, we have to understand why we're feeling this way. And it's usually because we've been having some kind of trauma that it might be minor to everybody else, but to you it's very significant. And only when that trauma is healed do we no longer respond in a negative way anymore. And so it's a healing process that we each have to go through. And we can only go through that by first being aware that I have a problem. Because I can't, I'm a physician and I can't treat a cancer if I don't know you have one, right? And so, some people keep trying to put Band-Aids on things, but, it's kind of Medusa's head. You cut off one head and you got 10 that come back up in other ways because we didn't get to the root,
So good.
Yeah, no, I love that too. And I'll kind of expand upon that a little bit. So ultimately, we're all creators of our own reality, right? Whatever you allow in your life, whatever decisions you make, that's totally up to you. So ultimately, if you're in a situation where your life does not reflect a reality that you want, then there's something going on there that's not in alignment with that life. Where that alignment comes from is exactly what my mom, Dr. Saddoris, was saying, You need to be aware of how that alignment is not aligned. And then what steps can you take to reach that alignment? So creating the reality you want is just about alignment. So where I'm going with this is think about the ideal life for you, which every person is going to be different, right? Everybody defines success in a different way. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to ideally meditate over this. You can journal over it. You can walk and just think about it. Everybody meditates differently, but think about that life. Think about how that person acts. Think about what that person eats. Think about how that person treats their body. What foods do they eat? How do they work out? How do they interact with others? How do they react with their significant other? All of the facets of that life, and really think about those things. And then align and tell yourself, literally, when you speak, you're casting spells. So put yourself into that situation. Say, I am a creator. I am powerful. I am successful. And then list off some of the things that you would like to incorporate into your life. If you make this a daily ritual, the universe has to respond because you're in alignment.
Yeah. And I think it also, in order to get to that point, I think there really needs to be an inner healing because, yes, we can all have our imagination of what we want and we're trying to say those things, but the things that we want may not be in alignment with our true self. We got the me in us that is all about the surface, but where is the I, the true self? And you have to get to that. And sometimes that requires accepting to release things. Sometimes we want certain outcomes and we strive for those outcomes, but maybe that outcome isn't the right one for you. And you're putting all this energy into something that isn't really in alignment with what you truly are. And so some of it is just really discovering what are my gifts and what are the things that I love to do and what comes easily and natural to me. Those are the things I need to pursue and develop because it's the suppression of the I that creates the angry person. It creates the envious and jealous person. That creates the person that is upset that they're not getting things that they want. But what they want may not be the things that are for them. They're wanting what other people have or what other people expect of them, but rather than what they really need. And so that comes into getting that inner healing and really just sitting there, and I call it releasing and cutting loose of attachments. We become attached to things. We want things to be a certain way. We want money. We want this. We want that. We become attached to objects. But once we release those attachments and they no longer, it doesn't matter how the outcome comes. It doesn't matter what it is. Everything's a learning experience in my life. Everything is a growth experience. Everything is good for me. I don't see anything as bad. I see everything as good. Yes, there are things that are painful that has happened to me, but in that pain has resulted in growth and change and understanding. And so it was never a negative. And that's the thing that we need to just kind of release those attachments and just say, I don't care anymore if this works out or not. I'm just going to pursue what I love. I'm going to do the best job that I can do in that. And you're going to find when you get aligned with your gifts and your purpose, then things magically happen in your life. The right people come across your path. You didn't strive for it. You didn't try for it. It just came and dropped into your lap and you just reached out and grabbed it and ran with it, right? Because your eyes were open and no longer clouded by emotion. Because emotions, I always feel, always lead us wrong because it's always based on pain and fear. And a lot of people say, well, I'm afraid of the unknown. I says, no, you're not afraid of the unknown because you don't know what's there. What is there to be afraid of? What you're truly afraid of is letting go of what you have. You're afraid to lose what you already have and not realizing that those are the things that are keeping you attached to keep you from going forward. And so when you start seeing things differently, you get different changes in your life.
Can I do just a little reflection really quick? I'm going to try to do a very basic example of a time in my life that this really applies. It's been a while. I still have some anchors in this, that I work through. But I was hearing you say, the key is awareness. That's where it starts. And so when you start to think about what does awareness look like, it might be like patterns, triggers, feedback consistently, right? Those are the things we're looking for like, I don't know if I have any. Well, we all do, but like the patterns, the triggers, the feedback, that's kind of how we see this. So if I look at one through my life, that I grew up with a mother that had straight A's, always loved to tell me about her straight A's, was always very, she would say, if I wasn't married and had kids, I would have been a nun. Love her, but like just a very perfectionistic mother, right? So therefore, and I'm still my mom and amazing and all this, but I grew up watching the straight A's and the perfect Catholic, mother and all this. And so feedback to me growing up was bad. And as I got into my teenage and young 28 years old or something, I had to learn that feedback was a gift because I used to become defensive. And I would become triggered in the feedback because I thought it was bad. And then I started to learn I was very much wrapped up in perfection. That was the core. And I had to start to see that that's not healthy, right? Like excellence over perfection. I'm giving my best, like, and breaking that cycle because it's not that my mom ever said, this is the way you're supposed to be perfect. I just learned that through the way. And then I started to work on the perfectionism and started to say to myself, I am enough as I am, and I'm going to pursue excellence. I'm not going for perfection, and started to see feedback as a gift. But when I walk through like that whole cycle, that's just kind of like an example of that. I wanted to just get some feedback.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. I actually wanted to add something to my mom's comments earlier as well, too. So the method that I was kind of alluding to was a Joe Dispenza method. And my mom kind of hit on a couple of these pieces as well. So, you're chasing outcomes, right? And you're chasing accolades, you're chasing certifications, diplomas, whatever, the promotion, whatever you're thinking. And a lot of times people feel like they have to get those things to get the confidence to actually make the moves that they need to make in the direction to their goals. But actually it's reversed. So to get those goals, you have to make the mindset shift first. So as my mom was saying, you can't trust emotions, especially when you're in that fear, guilt, shame state, which is 100% true because emotions give things life. So if something doesn't affect you and you don't have the attachment, it just rolls right off your back and it doesn't affect you. It's in one ear, out the other ear, gone, never affects you again, right? But if you haven't done that inner work, that triggers you. And that's where that negative emotion comes. Now, what if instead you harnessed positive emotions and you put yourself in that reality, and those positive emotions now give charge to the confidence that you have in your realm? And as my mom said earlier, you need to stay consistent and every single day do things that, whether it's a baby step, whether you take a centimeter forward, a mile forward, whatever it is, you're remaining open and you're still progressing towards your goals. So when those opportunities come, and they can come at the craziest times, you can pounce and take advantage of them and take those quantum leaps in your life.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the thing is that if you have a recurrent problem in your life, like my one sister, she had a problem with her father-in-law. He was very critical and had all kinds of issues. And then she had problems with her daughters got married, and it was their husbands' relatives. And it was always this issues. And I always say when you keep having recurrent type of angst issues, it's because there's something in you that you haven't learned yet. And that you have to either learn to release it, but also understand why you're having these conflicts. I just feel that life circumstances is the great revealer to make you aware. And when you're fighting against it, you're not learning from it and you're not growing from it. But if you're allowing those circumstances to allow you to be open to see what it was in me that needs to be changed, what is in me that needs to be healed, what is it that I'm supposed to learn from this circumstance, then everything is always good for you. And you're not having this problem. I mean, I always have this example of when you push against someone, they push back, right? But if someone's pushing against you and you just release it and don't push back, you're not adding wood to the fire, right? You're letting it go. You're not having that push type situation where you have to strive. So you release the struggle because it's not your fight. And the person that you're having problems with is not the person, it's yourself that's having a problem with, that they're triggering in you, that's making you be aware. But if you're not taking advantage of that, and sometimes the best person in your life is the one that gives you the most pain because that's the person you need to learn the most from.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And another piece, another tool for this that people can use, journal. Journal. It's so easy. That's how you figure out patterns. And when you start saying, oh, well, this person put me in this mood today because this happened, well, that's a fear-based mindset, right? Instead, you set the energy. No matter what room you're in, you set the tone. And that's where you can step into any room, no matter what, and people will then be able to just feel your presence because they know that you're leading with love. Everything needs to always be about love, compassion, enlightenment, transcendence, instead of fear, shame, guilt, and all these very low vibration or frequency emotions versus the high vibration. And when you do that, you become a magnet for everything that you desire.
Yeah, he's kind of like, you can be the thermometer that you're just kind of measuring the room and responding with them. You become the thermostat that you reset it to whatever level that you're trying to reset it to, and the growth that you have, you may not have a transformative effect on the people around you, but what you do have, though, is that you have this peace, this inner joy that's not based on outward things that you acquire, but the peace and joy of just knowing that you're in where you're meant to be and that everybody's on their own journey. And you can't sit there and say, well, oh, they're just learning this. I learned this a long time ago, therefore I must be further along. No, because they may have learned something that you're not even aware that you need to learn yet, right? So it eliminates the envy. It eliminates all of these negative feelings because we all have our own path that we need to follow.
It's so good.
Another way of putting that is growth is not linear.
That's good. I just wanted to kind of reconnect on, the topic that we're honing in on for probably a couple of conversations because it's so much, is how this applies to meaningful relationships. And there's so many different facets of our lives. Obviously, relationships are intertwined really everywhere you go. This foundation we're talking about is building a healthy self for really anything, right? Like all forms of being a alive human. This is going to help when it particularly comes to relationships. And that's what we're trying to do, is have meaningful relationships, get rid of the chaos that we tend to like have patterns on. Talk a little bit about that particularly and how important the inner work is and why we're talking about this directly tied to relationships.
So first of all, when it comes to relationships, and this is gonna be very short, ultimately your goal is to find your match. You are looking for you, but in the opposite sex, so that you can find the ideal mate. That yin yang symbol, that pattern, that can be male, female, not just light, dark. It's always duality. So that's what you're going to ultimately attract, is yourself. The energy you put into the world is going to be the energy you put back. So that's going to be what you search for, not for beauty, not for whatever other characteristics. That's always going to create negative patterns.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people, they jump into a relationship, whether if it's a business. I know with my son Robert, he wanted to create a good workout program that would be, a definite proteins at high quality. And he was about ready to partner with someone that just wanted to make money quick and use inferior products. And so right there off the bat, I told him, I says, you're not in alignment because one wants quick money and you want quality. And you're always going to be in disagreement. You're always going to have conflict. And I think this is where the problems a lot of people have in a relationship. They just jump into one that's just convenient, and they don't sit down and figure out what's important to you. Okay, what are things that are absolutes that a person has to have? And then what are things that are negotiable? And I mean negotiable, like, maybe they're not as neat or as tidy as you, and you decide to negotiate, and that's acceptable. But if you decide that to be acceptable, then you're no longer ever going to complain about that because you decided right off the bat that wasn't critical. I know for myself, my mom spent pretty much all my youth of complaining to my dad about his smoking. He says, "When are you going to quit? This is awful. It stinks. It's an nasty habit. It's not good for you." And of course, the more she complained, the more he smoked. It's kind of that pushback, right? And so when I got older, I told myself, I'm not going to spend my life complaining about somebody. My absolute is I will never date anybody that smokes cigarettes. Now, I know that may seem to be a ridiculous thing, and it might have been a negotiable thing for someone else, but for me, it was not. Okay. And so we have to know what is absolute, negotiable, and then also what is definitely if they have these traits, I don't even want to even go there. Right. So once you set down your criteria of what you think in your heart is what you really need, like let's say loyalty is very important to you and somebody else doesn't see that to be a high criteria, well, you're already on the wrong path. Someone wants children, someone doesn't. And you think, oh, once we get together, we have a child, they'll change their mind. No, you're not there to change somebody, right? You're there to accept them the way they are. And so if they're not, I had one patient that used to tell me, well, this guy's like 90% perfect. There's only 10% of things that I need to change on. I said, if you need to change them, you need to not do it, right? Because part of it is someone needs to feel loved the way they are, right? And if you feel like you have to make them different for you to accept them, then they're not for you. And so some of that inner work is what is important to me in a person or even if I'm getting into a business, what is it important in terms of the partner that you might be associating? Are they lazy and they want you to do all the work and you get all the kudos? Are they complementing what your weaknesses are so that your strength and their strength can be together rather than two weaknesses together are not going to do well? So I think it just is a matter of being realistic. And you're doing this in an unemotional way. You're not sitting there trying to judge this guy that you're already dating with and saying this. You're doing this before you ever encounter. So when you see things that are not in alignment with what you feel is needed for you, then you need to break the relationship off early before you have any emotional attachment to them. And therefore, it doesn't cause you angst or them angst. But, and you can tell people we're always on our best behavior when we're dating, but you want to look at them how they treat other people around them. Because they're going to treat you how they treat the lowest person. So if they kick a dog when they're coming around, or they, are very critical of other people, but they think you're just the perfect individual. No, they're going to be critical to you once the roses come off their glasses and they see the real you, right? You just have to really know what's important.
I love all of that. So in college, before I did a lot of the inner work, I definitely had, and my mom can definitely attest to this, some pretty dysfunctional relationships
Yes.
with women, let's
Yes.
just say. That's probably the most politically correct way of saying things. So I learned a lot from that. But what ultimately, I think the biggest thing to also incorporate everything that she just said, incredible, and that all 100% on board with. But the other piece to this too is, what are their goals? What motivates them? What are they wanting to accomplish in life? If someone's wanting to go be on the Peace Corps and somebody else wants to be a media mogul, probably not in alignment, right? So you need to figure out how everything that Dr. Saddoris said needs to apply, but then one step further, how are you going to grow together? So how are you going to handle situations that aren't ideal? Every person on the planet is going to have situations in their life that are going to be difficult, ultimately. Some more difficult than others, but how are you going? Okay, you can't play that. That's going to happen to you regardless. So now what? How do you play your hand after you reach these hard times? And how does that person help you get through those times? Does that person withdraw and just not know what to do and just go out and go to the bar or go do some other thing that's not really conducive to helping you heal through something or help you forward? Or is that person there for you? Are they contributing to things? Are they trying to look at what's going on and how they're able to add or help or add value? It's all about value. How can you provide the most value to each other?
I love this. And, really this series that we're bringing to life here is around the inner work needed for our deep, meaningful relationships that we all crave. We all want that, whether it's the romantic partner, the business coworker, the business partner, the sibling, the mother, our friends, right? Relationships are complex, they're challenging. And, as I'm sitting here listening to this, two things come to mind that just really hit home for me. One is how much I admire people I've met in my life that know themselves so well that they say no consistently. Like they're saying no to things because they know themselves so well that they've done the work, and that's like this outcome. And the other point of that is it's a journey. It's not like, oh, that person that I admired, that I think of a few of those people that come to mind, they know themselves so well that they know what to say no to because they want to stay on track and they want to honor themselves and what they know to be true. And it is an ongoing journey. This is, at one phase in our life, we're like, man, we are on it right now. But next year, unless we keep up with that, it doesn't stay. You got to keep at it and working on ourselves to stay there, to be that person. The other example on the kind of flip side, and we were talking about romantic relationships, people talk about the rebound, right? So they got into the rebound relationship. This is the example of the other side. You're in a hurt state. Something happened and you're looking to fill the gap. And it's, people will talk about the rebound. They're like, oh, that's a rebound. Because they're like, it's not going to last because you can see the writing on the wall. It's there to fill a hole. We weren't whole. There was a hole and it was being filled with that, right? So I just think really, really important, and just kind of looking at all relationships and how this applies. There's so much to it. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think one thing I realized too is that we all do different works on ourselves than others. And what may have been a relationship that was good at that time, I've seen this a lot with the people with addiction. We worked on them, they started seeing their actions, they started changing, but their partner never did. Okay. And so they reach a different level of emotional awareness of themselves and what they need and want. And the partner is wanting a dependent person, someone they can sit there and complain about and get all their sympathy from their friends. And now this person is responsible, doing all these things. They're not getting the sympathy. They're not getting all the attention. And so they end up having an affair with somebody else that gives them affection, and the relationship breaks up. So just because a relationship was great at one time, and, my other son, he was in a relationship with a lady that, was working great, but she wanted to party and he was trying to build his business. And so he wanted to spend his money on his business. So right there, they started diverging. She wanted to go out to bars. She wanted to go out drinking. She wanted to do all these things. And he didn't want to do all those things because he wanted to, invest in the things that he wanted. And of course, that relationship broke apart. And he kept thinking, well, we could stay in it because they'll get back to where they were before. No, unfortunately, sometimes when you go onto different paths, it just doesn't necessarily going to cross back together again, because you each have different goals and different values. And so sometimes we hold on to things because of while we're in the past and not realizing that the past is gone and we're dealing with the present, right? And so I think that's a common problem I see people encounter is, when do we walk away?
That's huge. Now, another piece to reflect on here as well, as going back to a point that we both made earlier, is every relationship and life in general is good, as we've already discussed, right? So ultimately, what is that relationship teaching you? What are the patterns that are coming up when you're ascending and you're learning these spiritual things, you're learning emotional intelligence, and you're progressing and somebody else is not? What is that teaching you? It's teaching you how to deal with boundaries and how to make sure that you are cultivating your own identity and your own energy that needs to be protected. And there are people out there that feed off of your energy, narcissists and many other kinds of people that are energy vampires. So you need to create. Sometimes you get into relationships and you lose your individual identity. And that's that codependence factor, right? So what's crucial in healthy, successful relationship, both individuals have their own identity that they can bring to the table and work collectively on something great.
Well, this has been so good as always. I think we're scratching the surface here on relationships. And I think we've done a really good job of laying the foundation. The quality of every relationship in our life, romantic, professional, personal, all of it, it reflects us. It reflects what's in us. And I think that you made that point very loud and clear today. And it's important for us to think through that and look at some of the patterns and feedback and these things that are regularly resurfacing, just to understand what's some new awareness that I might not be seeing right now, because it's a constant. This is, again, I shared before, it's this, you can have phases of life where you're like, I know who I am and I'm very clear and able to say no to things, and things happen and life changes, but we got to get back to that. And John shared a number of the, practices around like journaling and how we center ourselves regularly to stay in that as much as possible. But it's an ongoing journey. And I really thank you, John and Dr. Teddy, for your time today. And we'll look forward to doing our next step, which is really like taking it from the inner self and working on our inner self to lay that foundation. Now, how we bring that to our partner, to our, business relationships and things like that. So we'll be back soon to tackle the next part. Thank you so much for being here.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.
So you just listened to this episode. Now, join us in being addicted to betterment. Please subscribe to the show, share with your friends, tag us, and please take a moment, leave a review. Yeah, we do want your stars, but we really want the feedback.